Chapter 5, Beyond the Blue Mountain. An early sunbeam streaked through the one window of Kondima's hut. "Chaya, wake up. This is the day I am going with the Tuan." Kondima shook her sister awake. Chaya turned on her mat and opened her sleepy eyes. "Look, Chaya." Kondima held out a large piece of bark, the color and thickness of heavy brown paper, the sheath of a Penang palm leaf. "Look, Chaya, I am going to wrap my baby in this bark." She took the dolly that Mookit had carved for her. "I am going to wrap it well so nothing will harm it while I am away." By this time Chaya had awakened. She sat up, parted the mosquito curtain, and looked about the one room of the hut. Her eyes rested on the beam which crossed the length of the hut overhead. Heavy thongs of rattan held it in place. Why not tie the bundle to that beam with a string of bark? "I can climb up and fasten it." Kondima liked Chaya's idea, and Chaya scrambled up over the window and out onto the naked beam of the hut. With sure fingers she tied the precious bundle to the beam. Having thus disposed of her one treasure, Kondima felt impatient to depart. She looked out the window. The Tuan and Sabriel stood outside Dwad's house with one of the bohangas. The guru had just fastened the lid down on his bohangan. Kondima could see him through the open door of Dwad's house. Father talked with the Tuan in a low voice. Kondima could not catch their words. Mother came in the door. She had just returned from the spring, but no washing with spring water could take the swollen redness from Mother's eyes. She looked at Kondima and smiled. "Come, child, the Tuan is ready to go. You must not delay him. Be a good girl and do exactly as he says, and may God's blessing go with you." She took Kondima's hand and led her to the Tuan. Father walked with them to the top of the hill. Then, with a few short words of farewell, he turned back. Mookit had not yet awakened. Elijah still slept. So, making scarcely a ripple on the surface of its busy life, Kondima passed out of the village. She did not even turn to look down over the cluster of brown huts on the hillside. The Tuan did not stop to look back either. He walked into the jungle along the steep, narrow path that led away beyond the blue mountain. Kondima looked down at her old ragged dress. It had faded until it didn't seem to have any special color. Chaya had all the new dresses now, and Kondima wore the old ones. "I don't care," she told herself. "If my clothes are not nice to look at, people will not notice me. After all, what can be the use of pretty clothes for a little girl that no one wants to look at?" Having nothing to carry but his camera, which he had slung over his shoulder by a strap, the Tuan had both of his hands free. Kondima held on to one of them. "Are you a good traveler, little one?" The Tuan looked down at Kondima. "We have a long journey ahead." Kondima said nothing, but inside she felt warm and happy. Her brown feet kept time with the swing of the bohangans on the backs of the two carriers. Only the creak of the heavy thongs as the big bark containers swayed back and forth broke the forest quiet. Tall trees arched overhead. Kondima found the well-beaten path damp and slippery. On both sides, lacy ferns and thick brush made a green wall. Below the ridge, a family of monkeys chattered and called to one another in the morning stillness. Look, Tuan." Kondima pointed to a dark object on Sabrilia's bare leg. "Sabrilia, stop! You have a leech," the Tuan called. Sabrilia set his bohangan on the path and screwed his neck around to see the back of his leg. With a broad grin, he came back to where the Tuan already knelt beside a little first aid kit he always carried in his pocket. Drawing out a small glass bottle, he let one drop of brown medicine fall at the exact point where the leech had taken hold of Sabria's leg. "Iodine," the Tuan explained to the guru. The leech, under 5 pairs of watchful eyes, withdrew his spear and dropped to the earth. Sabria picked up a sharp stone and killed the creature at once. Kondima approved and admired the way the Tuan and Sabria had solved the problem. "Why can't you just pull the leech off?" the guru asked. "The wound would bleed terribly, and you might pull off the leech's body and leave his head buried in the flesh. Then you would get a nasty infected sore," Tuan explained as they hurried on their way. "If enough leeches fasten onto a person, they can suck so much blood that great weakness or even death may result." After this experience, all the travelers kept a sharp eye for the leeches. More than 20 times Kondima saw the small creatures drop from the wet branches, expecting to settle on warm brown flesh, but each person acted promptly to brush them off. Not another leech made a successful landing. As the 2 white men walked along the path, they talked. Kondima could not understand what they said, but Sabria, a Dusan himself, spoke her own language and called her attention to interesting things along the trail that led up and down the steep mountain. "When we get down into the valley beyond the next hill," he said in a merry voice, "I will find you a ripe durian. Maybe I will find 2 or 3. They jogged along another half-mile. "Do you see the blue mountain yonder?" Sabriel pointed to a high ridge far ahead. "When we reach the very top, you will be able to see the ocean." "Perhaps I shall not be able to see so far, Sabriel." A look of pain and embarrassment clouded the Dusan boy's face. They went down into the valley along an open hillside where some persons had cleared the forest and raised a crop of rice the year before. The sun shone down with intense heat. The Tuan looked at his watch. "It says only 9 o'clock. He snapped the watch shut. "How can it be so hot?" He stopped and wiped the sweat from his face. "Look, Sabriel, and see if any of those farmers have been careless and left a cucumber around somewhere." Sabriel set his bohangan down and scouted around the edge of the clearing. He came back in a few minutes with 2 large cucumbers. They were almost ripe, but full of juice. He had found them in the shade of tangled vines and brush. The field had been abandoned after harvest, so any passer-by could help himself to any vegetables remaining in the field. Come, the Tuan chuckled. "These cucumbers will make a nice clean drink for all of us." He had handed his sharp pocket knife to Sabriel. It looked exactly like Mookit's knife. Sabriel peeled both cucumbers and divided them among the 5 people. They sucked the juice out of the flesh and spit out the tough seeds. After this refreshment, the little company passed on with more strength. Coming to an open grassy spot in the forest, they sat down to rest. The 2 carriers refused to set down on the grass. They disappeared down a faint path into the jungle. A few minutes later, Kondima heard joyful shouts from far below. "They have found durian." Kondima wiggled her feet on the cool grass with happiness. Even the Tuan looked cheerful. They waited until the 2 Datsuns came out of the forest with durians dangling from both hands. "I declare I can't figure how anything can smell so rotten and taste so good," the guru spoke. Gabriel borrowed the Tuan's knife again and sharpened a blunt stick. He bored it into the end of the durian. The fruit, which Kondima thought must be larger than her own head, was covered with sharp green spikes an inch long. As Sabriel pressed harder and harder on the nose of the durian, it suddenly burst open and fell into several sections like an orange. You may think what you like about durian, the Tuan spoke now. It is king of all fruit. Just be quick and pass it around, Sabriel. Sabriel picked up the segments of the large fruit and passed them to everyone. Nestled in the white fibrous sections were fat lumps of golden cream. The travelers picked out those lumps with eager fingers and sucked the sweet, rich cream from around the seeds. Sabriel opened durian after durian until the last one melted down eager throats. What a feast! The guru stood up, stretched his long arms, and licked his lips. Where could anyone find a better breakfast? Kondima wiped her sticky hands on her skirt and ran her fingers through her hair several times. Everyone felt better now. An hour of stiff climbing brought them to the ridge that Sabriel had pointed out. The path led along the saddle for half an hour and came out in a small clearing. Far below, the great ocean lay calm and blue as far as the eye could see. Between the mountaintop and the sea, hills of lesser height seemed to roll like giant waves. Every shade of living green covered them. Kondima saw that everybody watched her with anxious eyes. "Is that the valley of water, Tuan?" She waved her small hand over the glorious scene. "Oh, how beautiful!" She clasped her hands in ecstasy. "I can see it! I can see it!" A look of relief passed over the Tuan's thin face. They all stopped to enjoy the view for a few minutes, then entered again the steep path that led downward. The valley of water came no more into view. The trail led now over steep places where the travelers had to hold like monkeys to the naked rocks and roots of trees. "You must be very tired, little one." The Tuan lifted Kondima to his shoulder and carried her for half an hour. "Just to rest those small legs," he said. At noon they reached a small stream dashing down the mountain through its stony bed. Tuan sat down on a large rock. He told Sabrina to open his bohangan. He dug into it and produced a thin biscuit. Kondima stared in wonder. The tin looked beautiful. How Mookit would like to carry off such a tin as that. Inside the tin, many shapes and colors of biscuits set close together. Kondima tried all the different kinds while the Tuan held her on his knee, whispering soft and comforting words. She began to feel very far from the little village, from her mamma. Although she had enjoyed the trip so much, she would be glad to see Chaya and Elijah poke their heads out of the forest right now. She would even welcome the sight of Mookit. How gladly she would scurry home with them. The Tuan set her feet in the cool water of the stream. "Play in the water for a little while," he said. "It will rest your tired feet." Sabriel and the other carrier lolled in the shade with their feet in the stream. Even the guru pulled off his shoes and washed his feet in the cool water. An hour passed before they took up their journey again. They came at once to the edge of a swamp. Long grass grew out of the mud, and tall trees bent over the black, boggy ground. "Shh!" The Tuan put his finger to his lips. Everyone stood still, hardly breathing. "See that monkey going down to the swamp to drink?" The Tuan whispered in Kondima's ear. Following the direction of the Tuan's pointing finger, Kondima could make out the form of a dark-colored monkey swinging down from a branch of green creeper overhanging a small pool. "Is there a baby monkey?" Kondima whispered back. Yes, indeed, a baby monkey clung to its mother's breast with all four of its tiny little hands. "Oh, Tuan!" Sabriel's face twisted in horror. He screamed as loud as he could. The startled monkey darted up the tree in a flash. Then Kondima and the others could see the coils of a huge water python, the glint of his blunt head as he lunged at the spot where the monkey had been a second before. "Let's get out of here," several voices cried at once. The whole party trotted along the path at the edge of the swamp, faster and faster until they had passed the dangerous ground. "I wonder if the snake might have his mate up at this end of the swamp." The guru puffed a little as he slowed to a brisk walk. At the close of the long day, when the sun dropped in the western sky, they came to a well-beaten path on level ground. Kondima, who had been trotting along with cheerful patience, began to hear strange noises, the like of which she had never heard before. She clutched the Tuan's hand in real fright. They came out on a broad place where the ground seemed to be made of flat stones in a long strip which stretched out in both directions until Kondima could see no end of it. Right in the middle of this strip stood the strangest animal Kondima had ever seen. Its bright red color and its size, 10 times as big as a water buffalo, convinced Kondima that this creature must be a horrible dream or a nightmare. The animal breathed hard and fast and shook a little as it stood there panting in the middle of the smooth rock strip. The beast's eyes were large and set well apart. Altogether it presented a terrible appearance. Kondima looked at the Tuan. He seemed to be calm. He laughed and talked with a man who rested one hand on the monster. At that moment the animal lifted its voice in a shrill roar. Kondima knew that she had heard and seen enough. She snatched her hand away from the Tuan and streaked down the path towards home as fast as her tired little legs could carry her, screaming at every jump. The Tuan could run fast, too. In a few moments he overtook her and scooped her up into his arms. "Don't be afraid, little one," he comforted her. "This is our bus, and this man is the bus driver. He is a fine fellow. He has a little daughter about your size. See, he is going to let us ride on the front seat with him." The whole party, together with their bohongans, were taken into the bus, and Kondima saw that it had been empty all the time.